You're about to hear the incredible true story of Max, a failed therapy dog who saved a little girl, but that was just the beginning. What happened next will blow your mind. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the pristine lawns of Willow Creek, an upscale suburb nestled 30 minutes outside Austin. White picket fences lined perfectly manicured streets where SUVs sat in driveways and children's bicycles lay abandoned on emerald grass. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew their place, where routine ruled supreme, and where nothing unexpected ever happened. Until that fateful Sunday afternoon in July. 4-year-old Lily Martinez sat cross-legged on the warm concrete beside her family's sparkling blue pool, her tiny fingers arranging colorful plastic toys in neat little rows. Her dark curls caught the sunlight as she hummed softly to herself, completely absorbed in her make-believe world. She wore a bright yellow sundress dotted with tiny butterflies, and her bare feet kicked contentedly as she played. "Princess needs to go to the castle," she whispered to her favorite doll, completely unaware that she was alone in the vast backyard. Inside the air-conditioned comfort of the Martinez home, 23-year-old Sarah Chun fought to keep her heavy eyelids open. She'd pulled a brutal 12-hour shift at Austin General Hospital the night before, covering for a colleague who'd called in sick. The exhaustion hit her like a freight train as she settled into the plush leather couch, telling herself she'd just rest her eyes for a moment while Lily played safely in the enclosed backyard. "Just 5 minutes," Sarah mumbled, her nursing scrubs still wrinkled from the long night. The steady hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of Lily's gentle playing lulled her into an unexpected deep sleep. What Sarah didn't know was that Lily had discovered something fascinating. The sliding glass door that led to the pool area had a handle she could actually reach if she stood on her tiptoes. Her adventurous spirit, the same trait that made her parents both proud and perpetually worried, kicked in as she managed to unlock and slide open the heavy door with surprising determination. "I did it," she giggled to herself, stepping out into the blazing heat. Meanwhile, 3 houses down, Max, a magnificent 120-pound German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes and a coat like burnished bronze, paced restlessly in his own backyard. His keen senses had picked up something unusual, the sound of a child's voice coming from the direction of the pool, but no adult voices accompanying it. His ears perked forward, and his powerful muscles tensed as every instinct screamed that something wasn't right. Without hesitation, Max launched himself over the 6-foot cedar fence with the grace of an athlete, landing silently in the Martinez backyard. His massive frame moved with surprising stealth as he approached the pool area, where Lily now sat dangerously close to the water's edge, her small legs dangling just inches from the deep end. "Doggy!" Lily exclaimed with pure delight, clapping her hands together as she spotted the imposing figure approaching. She had no concept of fear, only wonder at this beautiful creature who had somehow appeared in her world. But Max's reaction defied every stereotype about aggressive guard dogs. Instead of barking or showing any sign of threat, he moved with deliberate gentleness, using his massive head to nudge Lily away from the pool's edge. His amber eyes never left her face as he positioned his powerful body between the little girl and the water, creating an impenetrable barrier of fur and muscle. "Good doggy," Lily giggled, reaching out to pat his soft fur. "Are you here to play with me?" Max's response was immediate and startling. He began barking, not the aggressive bark of a territorial animal, but a rhythmic, urgent bark directed toward the house. It was as if he understood exactly what needed to happen and was calling for the help that Lily desperately needed. The thunderous barking shattered the afternoon silence like a fire alarm, reverberating through the quiet streets of Willow Creek. Across the neighborhood, windows began sliding open and curious faces appeared, drawn by the urgency in Max's voice. Mrs. Eleanor Hutchinson, a 78-year-old retired teacher who lived directly across the street, dropped her watering can and pressed her face against her kitchen window. "Oh my God!" she gasped, her weathered hands flying to her mouth as she witnessed the scene unfolding in the Martinez backyard. "That's little Lily, and she's all alone." The relentless barking finally penetrated Sarah's exhausted sleep. She jolted awake, her heart hammering as the fog of sleep cleared and reality crashed down on her like a cold wave. The sliding door was wide open, and through it came the sound of an enormous dog barking with fierce determination. "Lily!" Sarah screamed, stumbling off the couch and racing toward the backyard, her bare feet slipping on the marble tiles. Terror gripped her throat as she burst through the doorway, expecting the worst. What she found instead stopped her dead in her tracks. There was Lily, sitting cross-legged on the pool deck, completely safe and giggling as she gently stroked the massive German shepherd who sat protectively beside her. Max's barking ceased the moment he saw Sarah, but his amber eyes remained alert and watchful. "Miss Sarah, look at my new friend," Lily called out cheerfully, completely oblivious to the danger she'd been in. "He's so pretty and soft." Sarah's knees nearly buckled with relief, but her training as a nurse kicked in. She approached slowly, not wanting to startle either the child or the obviously well-trained dog. "Lily, honey, come to me slowly, okay? Don't make any sudden movements." "But why?" Lily asked innocently. "He's nice. He was protecting me from the pool. He wouldn't let me get too close to the water." Before Sarah could respond, hurried footsteps echoed from the side yard, and a voice called out with obvious concern. "Max! Max, where are you, boy?" Around the corner appeared a tall, elderly man with silver hair and kind blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore khaki pants and a faded Houston Astros t-shirt, and his face was etched with worry lines that deepened when he spotted his dog. "I'm so sorry," the man said breathlessly, his hands shaking slightly as he approached. "I'm Robert Whitaker. I live 3 houses down." Max must have jumped the fence. "I hope he didn't frighten anyone." Sarah looked from the gentle giant sitting protectively next to Lily to the obviously distressed older man. "Mr. Whitaker, I think your dog might have just saved my daughter's life." Robert's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I fell asleep inside," Sarah admitted, her voice thick with guilt and emotion. "Lily managed to unlock the door and came out here alone. When I woke up, Max was barking to alert someone, and he was positioned between Lily and the pool like he was guarding her." Robert's weathered face softened with understanding. "That's Max for you. He was trained for search and rescue work, but—" He paused, a shadow crossing his features. "They said he was too gentle for field work, too concerned with comfort rather than just locating. Guess they were wrong about that being a weakness." Lily looked up at both adults with curious eyes. "Can Max come play with me again? I like him. He makes me feel safe." The simple honesty in her words hung in the air between the 3 adults. Sarah found herself studying Robert Whitaker more closely. There was something about his posture, the way he held himself, that spoke of recent loss. His clothes were neat, but his hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it. And there was a loneliness in his eyes that seemed to mirror something in Max's devoted gaze. "Mr. Whitaker," Sarah said carefully, "would you and Max like to stay for some iced tea? I think we all could use a chance to catch our breath." Robert's surprise was evident. "I wouldn't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Sarah insisted. "After what just happened, I think we need to talk. And frankly, I'm not ready to let Lily out of my sight just yet." As if sensing the shift in mood, Max gently nuzzled Lily's hand and gave a soft whine, not of distress, but of contentment. It was the beginning of something none of them could have predicted, a bond that would transform not just their lives, but the entire fabric of their quiet suburban community. The next 3 weeks brought a transformation that amazed everyone who witnessed it. What had started as a chance encounter became a daily ritual that neighbors began to anticipate and gather to watch. Every afternoon at precisely 4 o'clock, Max would appear at the Martinez family's back gate, his tail wagging with eager anticipation, while Lily would press her small face against the sliding glass door, her eyes lighting up the moment she spotted her protector. "There he is. There's Max," Lily would squeal, tugging on Sarah's hand with surprising strength for such a small child. Sarah had initially been hesitant about the daily visits, but she couldn't deny the remarkable change in Lily's behavior. The little girl, who had always been painfully shy around strangers and clung to her parents in social situations, seemed to transform into a confident, chattering child whenever Max was present. "Tell him about the butterflies, Lily," Sarah encouraged one particularly warm afternoon as they sat in the shade of the large oak tree that dominated their backyard. "You saw them in the garden this morning." Lily's face lit up as she turned to Max, who sat at attention beside her, his amber eyes focused intently on her face, as if he understood every word. Max, you should have seen them. There were yellow ones and white ones, and one had orange spots. They were dancing in Mama's flowers. As she spoke, Lily's hands moved expressively, and Max responded with soft whines and gentle head tilts that seemed almost conversational. It was an interaction that never failed to amaze the growing audience of neighbors who had begun to make excuses to walk by during Lily and Max's time. Robert Whitaker had become a regular fixture as well, though Sarah noticed he often seemed uncomfortable with the attention their unusual friendship was drawing. He was a man of few words, but when he did speak, his insights about both children and dogs revealed a depth of knowledge that intrigued her. Max was part of a specialized program at the Austin K-9 Training Center, Robert explained one afternoon as they watched Lily attempt to teach Max to sit pretty with his paws up. They were developing therapy dogs for trauma victims, but the trainers felt he was too intuitive, too emotionally involved. They wanted dogs who could maintain professional distance. That seems like exactly what makes him perfect for this, Sarah observed, watching as Max gently caught Lily when she stumbled while demonstrating a dance move. Robert's smile was tinged with sadness. That's what I told them. But I was just a grieving widower who didn't know when to let go. They thought I was projecting my own emotional needs onto the dog. The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Sarah felt her heart clench with sympathy. She'd learned through neighborhood gossip that Robert had lost his wife of 52 years just 6 months earlier, and that moving to Willow Creek had been his attempt to start fresh somewhere without memories. Mr. Whitaker, Sarah said gently, I don't think you were projecting anything. I think you recognized something special in Max that they couldn't see. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of excited voices from the front yard. Through the side gate, they could see a small crowd gathering. Mrs. Hutchinson with her 2 granddaughters who were visiting for the summer, the Petersons from next door with their twin boys, and several other neighbors who had been drawn by the increasingly legendary story of the dog who saved a little girl. Looks like word is spreading, Robert muttered, his discomfort evident. But before Sarah could respond, 8-year-old Emma Peterson came running into the backyard, her face flushed with excitement. Mrs. Martinez, my mom said I could ask if Max might want to meet my little brother Tommy. He's been having nightmares ever since our house got broken into last month, and Mom thinks maybe. Sarah looked at Robert questioningly. The elderly man's expression softened as he watched Emma's hopeful face, and after a moment, he nodded slowly. We could try a short visit, he agreed. But we'd need to be very careful and watch both Max and Tommy for any signs of stress. What happened next surprised everyone. When 5-year-old Tommy Peterson was brought over, trembling and hiding behind his mother's legs, Max seemed to sense the boy's fear immediately. The large dog lowered himself to the ground, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible, and began a soft, rhythmic whining that somehow conveyed comfort rather than distress. Lily, without any prompting from the adults, walked over to Tommy and took his hand. It's okay, she said with the simple certainty that only children possess. Max makes the scared feelings go away. He's like a magic blanket, but with fur. Within 10 minutes, both children were sitting on either side of Max, their small hands buried in his soft coat, their earlier fears forgotten as they chattered about their favorite cartoons and playground games. This is remarkable, breathed Dr. Patricia Martinez, who had just arrived home from her job as a child development professor at the University of Texas. She stood in the doorway, her briefcase still in hand, watching the scene with the trained eye of someone who had spent decades studying children's emotional development. Mom, Lily called out, come meet Max. He's the best dog in the whole world. As Patricia approached, Robert stood and extended his hand formally. You must be Lily's mother. I'm Robert Whitaker. I want to apologize again for Max jumping your fence that first day. Mr. Whitaker, Patricia said warmly, shaking his hand. I think you and Max might have given us something much more valuable than an apology could ever address. Dr. Patricia Martinez couldn't stop thinking about what she'd witnessed in her backyard. As a professor specializing in child development and early intervention strategies, she'd seen countless therapy programs, but nothing quite like the natural, intuitive connection between Max and the children. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, frantically typing notes while the images of Lily and Tommy's transformation played on repeat in her mind. You should have seen it, Miguel, she told her husband when he returned from his evening jog. Miguel Martinez was an investigative journalist for the Austin American-Statesman, and Patricia knew his instincts for recognizing important stories were as sharp as hers were for understanding child psychology. Miguel toweled off his sweat and poured himself a glass of water, his dark eyes focused intently on his wife's animated explanation. "So you're telling me that this dog, who was rejected from official therapy training, might actually be better at this than professionally trained animals?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Patricia replied, her excitement building. "Max doesn't just provide comfort. He seems to actually read the emotional needs of each child and adjust his responses accordingly. When Tommy was scared, Max made himself smaller and quieter. With Lily, who's naturally more confident, he's playful and responsive. It's like he has an emotional intelligence that adapts in real time." Miguel's journalistic instincts kicked in. "How long has this been going on? And how many kids have interacted with him?" 3 weeks, and we're up to 6 children now," Patricia said, consulting her notes. "Emma and Tommy Peterson, the Williams twins from down the street, little Carlos from the corner house, and now Mrs. Chin's daughter Amy wants to bring her friend over tomorrow." "Pat, this could be huge," Miguel said, sitting down beside her. "I mean, if this is working the way you're describing, there could be applications for schools, hospitals, therapy centers." Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Through the front window, they could see Robert Whitaker standing on their porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Miguel opened the door to find the elderly man holding a manila folder and looking apologetic. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," Robert began, "but I've been doing some research, and I think there are some things you should know about Max's background." Patricia invited him in, and they settled in the living room where Robert carefully opened his folder. Inside were certificates, training records, and several official-looking documents. "Max completed the entire therapy dog certification program," Robert explained, his voice gaining strength as he spoke about his beloved companion. "He passed every test: obedience, stress response, public interaction. The only thing he failed was the final evaluation where they said he was too emotionally invested in the subjects." Patricia leaned forward, studying the documents. "What exactly did that mean?" Robert's smile was both proud and sad. During the test scenarios, when they presented him with actors pretending to be distressed, Max wouldn't just provide comfort and move on like he was supposed to. He would stay with each person until he was absolutely certain they were okay. With children especially, he would refuse to leave if he sensed they were still afraid. "That's not a flaw," Patricia said firmly. "That's exactly what these kids need. A companion who won't abandon them when they're vulnerable." "That's what my wife used to say," Robert replied quietly. "Clara always believed Max was special. She used to joke that he was too good for professional work because he actually cared too much." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of Robert's loss hanging in the air. Then Miguel spoke up, his voice gentle but excited. "Mr. Whitaker, would you be willing to let me document some of this? I think there's a story here that could help a lot of people." Robert looked uncertain. "I don't know about publicity. Max and we prefer to keep things quiet." "It wouldn't have to be about you personally," Patricia interjected, her mind racing with possibilities. "But Miguel's right. If we could document the therapeutic benefits of what's happening here, it could lead to real programs that help children all over the state." Before Robert could respond, the sound of Lily's bedroom door opening upstairs caught their attention. Small footsteps padded down the hallway, and soon Lily appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "Mama, is Mr. Whitaker here? Is Max okay?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep and concern. "Max is fine, sweetie," Patricia called up. "Mr. Whitaker just stopped by to talk to us about something. Can you tell him that I had a dream about Max tonight?" Lily said seriously. "We were helping other kids who were sad, and Max was wearing a special red vest that meant he was a helper dog." The 3 adults exchanged meaningful glances. Out of the mouths of babes, Patricia thought, remembering the old saying her grandmother used to quote. "I'll tell him, Mija," Patricia promised. Now back to bed. As Lily's footsteps retreated down the hallway, Robert looked at the 2 adults with something like wonder in his eyes. She dreamed about Max helping other children? "Kids are often more intuitive than we give them credit for," Patricia said softly. "Maybe Lily's seeing something we're all just beginning to understand." That night, after Robert had gone home with promises to consider Miguel's documentation idea, Patricia sat at her computer composing an email to Dr. Rebecca Santos, the director of Austin's Municipal Children's Services. If what she was witnessing in her backyard could be replicated and expanded, it might just revolutionize how they approach child therapy in their community. But first, she needed to convince the city that sometimes the most powerful healing comes from the most unexpected sources. 3 months into what the neighborhood had begun calling the Max Miracle, Mother Nature decided to test the strength of the bonds that had been forming in Willow Creek. The weather reports had been ominous all week. A massive storm system was barreling towards central Texas, promising to bring the kind of flooding that Austin hadn't seen in decades. All residents in low-lying areas should prepare for immediate evacuation. The emergency broadcast crackled from radios and televisions throughout the suburb. The Willow Creek Community Center has been designated as an emergency shelter. Patricia stood at her kitchen window, watching the Martinez family's neighbors hurriedly loading cars with essential belongings. The normally pristine streets were already beginning to show puddles, and the storm hadn't even reached its peak yet. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from the university canceling classes and from Dr. Santos's office postponing their scheduled meeting about the therapy dog program proposal. "Mom, where's Max?" Lily asked, pressing her face against the sliding glass door that led to their now-empty backyard. "He always comes to play at 4 o'clock. Remember, sweetheart?" Mr. Whitaker had to take Max somewhere safe because of the big storm coming, Patricia explained, though she was increasingly worried about the elderly man and his dog. Robert had mentioned that his small rental house sat in one of the areas most likely to flood. By 6 o'clock that evening, the Martinez family found themselves joining the stream of neighbors heading to the community center. The modern building, usually home to yoga classes and town council meetings, had been transformed into a maze of cots, folding chairs, and anxious families clutching hastily packed bags. "Patricia, Miguel," came a familiar voice from across the crowded space. Dr. Rebecca Santos, a petite woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes, was helping coordinate the shelter efforts. "I'm so glad you made it safely. How's Lily handling this?" Patricia glanced at her daughter, who was clinging to her favorite stuffed animal and scanning the crowd with obvious anxiety. "She's worried about Max and Mr. Whitaker. They've become such an important part of her daily routine." "Speaking of which," Dr. Santos said, lowering her voice, "I've been meaning to call you back about your therapy dog proposal. The preliminary research you sent was fascinating, but I have to admit, I was skeptical about the claims until Dr. Santos interrupted a harried-looking volunteer. "We have a situation in the children's area. Some of the kids are getting really upset, and we can't seem to calm them down." Patricia immediately understood. The community center, despite the volunteers' best efforts, was a chaotic, noisy environment filled with stressed adults and frightened children who had been uprooted from their familiar surroundings. For kids like Tommy Peterson, who was still dealing with anxiety from the break-in, or the Williams twins, who had separation anxiety, this situation could be traumatic. "Where exactly is Mr. Whitaker staying?" Miguel asked Dr. Santos urgently. "If his house is in a flood zone." "The Henderson Street evacuees were brought here about 2 hours ago," she replied, pointing toward a section near the gymnasium. "But I think they had to leave pets at the animal shelter across town." Patricia felt her heart sink. The thought of Robert being separated from Max during this stressful time, especially given how much the dog meant to him since his wife's death, was heartbreaking. And she knew that Max's calming presence could help not just Lily, but all the frightened children in the shelter. "There he is," Lily suddenly exclaimed, pointing across the crowded room. "Mr. Whitaker." Patricia followed her daughter's gaze and spotted Robert sitting alone on a cot in the corner, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion and worry. His usually neat silver hair was disheveled, and he was staring at his hands with the expression of someone who had lost everything once before and was watching it happen again. "Can we go see him, Mama?" Lily asked. He looked sad without Max. The three of them made their way through the crowd, and when Robert looked up to see them approaching, his face showed a mix of relief and embarrassment. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, starting to stand. "I know you have your own family to worry about. I shouldn't be taking up space here when—" "Robert, stop," Patricia said firmly, sitting down on the adjacent cot and gesturing for him to sit back down. "You belong here just as much as anyone else. We're all in this together." "But I don't really belong anywhere," Robert said quietly, his voice barely audible above the noise of the shelter. Clara and I never had children. No family to speak of. When she died, I thought maybe moving here would help, but I'm still just displaced. Lily, with the directness that only children possess, climbed onto the cot next to Robert and took his hand. "You're not displaced," she said seriously. "You're Max's daddy, and Max is my best friend, so that makes you my friend too. And friends take care of each other." Robert's eyes filled with tears, and he squeezed Lily's small hand gently. "Thank you, little one. That means more than you know." "Dr. Santos," Miguel said suddenly, an idea clearly forming. "What would it take to get Max cleared to come here? If he's as well trained as Robert says, and if he could help calm the children." Dr. Santos looked thoughtful. "It would be highly irregular, but given the circumstances and the preliminary documentation Patricia provided about his therapeutic effects. Let me make some calls." As if summoned by their conversation, a commotion erupted from the children's area where Tommy Peterson was having what appeared to be a full panic attack, his mother kneeling beside him helplessly as he hyperventilated and cried about wanting to go home. "That settles it," Dr. Santos said decisively, pulling out her phone. "If Max is half as effective as you've described, we need him here. Robert, I'm going to need you to walk me through his qualifications and training." For the first time since the storm began, hope flickered in Robert's tired eyes. 2 hours later, the community center doors opened to admit a sight that would become legendary in Willow Creek folklore. Robert Whitaker walked through the entrance, soaked from the rain but smiling, with Max at his side wearing a bright red therapy dog vest that Dr. Santos had somehow procured from the animal shelter. The magnificent German shepherd surveyed the crowded, chaotic scene with calm intelligence, as if he understood exactly why he was needed. "Max!" Lily's delighted shriek cut through the ambient noise of the shelter, and before anyone could stop her, she was running across the room toward her four-legged friend. Max's tail began wagging immediately, but he remained in perfect heel position beside Robert until the elderly man gave him a gentle release command. "Go on, boy. Go help," Robert said softly, and Max moved forward to greet Lily with the gentle enthusiasm that had become his trademark. The effect was immediate and almost magical. Other children began gravitating toward the pair, their earlier fears and anxieties temporarily forgotten in the wonder of seeing Max. Tommy Peterson, who had been sobbing inconsolably just minutes before, wiped his eyes and cautiously approached. "Is that really Max?" he whispered to Lily, his voice still shaky but filled with hope. "Uh-huh. And look, he has a special vest now. That means he's officially a helper dog," Lily announced proudly, her small hands gently stroking Max's soft fur. Dr. Santos watched the scene unfold with professional fascination. Within 15 minutes of Max's arrival, the noise level in the children's area had dropped significantly. The anxious crying had been replaced by soft conversations and even occasional laughter as kids took turns petting Max and telling him about their fears. But it was what happened next that truly amazed everyone present. Maria Gonzalez, the community center's part-time music teacher, had been trying unsuccessfully to organize some kind of calming activity for the children. She'd brought her guitar, hoping that music might provide some comfort, but the kids had been too upset to focus. Now, as she watched Max interact with the children, she noticed something extraordinary. The dog's soft panting and the gentle rhythm of his tail wagging seemed to create a natural tempo. Almost without thinking, Maria began to strum her guitar in time with Max's movements. "That's it," she said suddenly, her eyes lighting up with inspiration. "Max, you're making music." Lily looked up with interest. "What do you mean, Miss Maria?" "Listen," Maria said, beginning to play a simple, soothing melody that matched the rhythm of Max's breathing. Max is like a metronome. His heartbeat, his breathing, it's all making a natural rhythm that feels safe and calm. The children gathered closer, their attention captured by this new idea. Even the adults began to take notice as Maria continued to play, weaving a gentle musical spell around the group clustered around Max. "Can I try something?" came a hesitant voice from the edge of the circle. Everyone turned to see Robert Whitaker standing there, his expression uncertain but hopeful. I played piano once upon a time. "Mr. Whitaker, I didn't know you were musical," Patricia exclaimed, remembering the conversation they'd had about his wife, but not knowing about any musical background. Robert's cheeks flushed slightly. Clara and I used to play together. She sang, I played piano. But after she died, I couldn't. The music reminded me too much of what I'd lost. Maria's face softened with understanding. The community center has an old, upright piano in the meeting room. Would you like to try playing with us? What followed was something that none of the storm evacuees would ever forget. Robert, with Max lying peacefully at his feet, began to play. His fingers, stiff from months of disuse, slowly found their way across the keys, picking out a melody that seemed to emerge from somewhere deep in his memory. It was simple but hauntingly beautiful, a song that spoke of love and loss and the possibility of hope emerging from darkness. Lily, always sensitive to the emotions of those around her, began to hum along with the melody. Her voice was pure and sweet, and gradually, other children joined in, humming the wordless tune that seemed to wrap around them like a warm blanket. "This is incredible," Dr. Santos whispered to Patricia, who was recording the impromptu concert on her phone. "Look at their faces." Patricia looked around the room and saw what Dr. Santos meant. The stressed, frightened expressions had given way to something approaching peace. Adults had stopped their anxious conversations to listen, and even the volunteer workers had paused in their duties to witness the unexpected magic happening in their midst. Tommy Peterson, who had been too afraid to speak earlier, tugged on Maria's sleeve. "Can Max and Mr. Whitaker teach us more songs? I want to learn how to make music that feels safe like this." "I think that's a wonderful idea," Maria replied, her own eyes bright with tears. "Maybe when we all get back to our homes, we can start a music group. Max can be our inspiration." As the evening wore on and the storm raged outside, the community center was filled with more than just the sound of rain and wind. It was filled with music, laughter, and the kind of connections that form when people are stripped of their usual defenses and reminded of what really matters. Robert continued to play, his confidence growing with each song. Max remained a calm, steady presence in the center of it all, somehow managing to provide comfort to every child who needed it while never leaving Robert's side for long. And Lily, the little girl whose encounter with this remarkable dog had started it all, seemed to glow with happiness as she watched her friend bringing joy to so many others. "You know," Miguel said to his wife as they watched their daughter conduct an imaginary orchestra with Max as her patient accompanist, "I think we're witnessing the birth of something much bigger than we ever imagined." 6 weeks after the storm, life in Willow Creek had settled into a new rhythm that felt both familiar and wonderfully different. The weekly music sessions that had begun in the emergency shelter had evolved into Max's Music Circle, a regular gathering held every Saturday morning in the community center's main hall. Children from across the suburb came with their parents, grandparents, and siblings to participate in what had become a local phenomenon. Robert Whitaker had transformed from a grieving widower hiding from the world into the unofficial maestro of these gatherings. His piano playing had regained its former grace, and watching him interact with the children had revealed a natural teacher's instinct that surprised everyone, including himself. "Mr. Whitaker, can Max sing today?" asked 6-year-old Sophie Chun, bouncing on her toes with excitement as she approached the piano bench where Robert was warming up. "Well, Max doesn't exactly sing," Robert replied with a smile. "But he does have his own special way of making music. Why don't you ask him?" Sophie immediately turned to Max, who was lying in his usual spot beside the piano, and began explaining in the serious tone that children use when addressing important matters. "Max, today we're going to play the happy song, the one that makes Tommy stop having scary dreams. Will you help us?" Max's response was a gentle tail wag and a soft whine that somehow perfectly complemented the opening notes Robert began to play. It was a scene that had become beautifully routine, yet it never failed to move the adults who witnessed it. Patricia stood near the back of the room, taking notes for the comprehensive report she was preparing for Dr. Santos and the City Council. The preliminary data was remarkable. Children who participated in Max's Music Circle showed measurable improvements in anxiety levels, social interaction, and emotional regulation. But more than that, she was documenting the ripple effects throughout the community. Families were connecting across generations, neighbors were forming lasting friendships, and the entire atmosphere of Willow Creek had shifted towards something more open and inclusive. "Mrs. Martinez," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Linda Peterson, Tommy's mother, approaching with tears in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you for what this has done for Tommy. He hasn't had a nightmare in 3 weeks, and yesterday he told his teacher he wants to learn to play piano so he can make Max music for other scared kids. Before Patricia could respond, her attention was caught by a sudden change in the scene near the piano. Max had risen to his feet, his ears alert and his body tense with concern. He was looking directly at Robert, who was still playing but had gone slightly pale. Clara used to love this song, Robert murmured, his fingers continuing to move across the keys even as his voice became strained. She said it reminded her of dancing in the rain. Patricia's training in child development had taught her to read subtle signs of distress, and she immediately recognized what was happening. Robert was experiencing more than just a memory. He was showing signs of physical distress. Max had noticed it too, the dog's keen senses picking up on changes in his beloved human that weren't yet obvious to others. Max moved closer to the piano bench, gently pressing his massive body against Robert's leg in the way he did when providing comfort. But instead of his usual calm demeanor, the dog's behavior showed unmistakable signs of agitation. Something's wrong, Patricia said quietly to Miguel, who had been taking photographs for his ongoing documentation project. Look at Max. Miguel focused his camera lens on the scene and immediately saw what his wife meant. Max was exhibiting behavior they'd never seen before. He was whining softly but insistently, pawing gently at Robert's hand, and positioning himself in a way that seemed designed to get the elderly man's attention. Mr. Whitaker? Lily's clear voice cut through the music as she approached the piano. With the intuitive awareness that had made her so special with Max, she seemed to sense something was amiss. Are you feeling okay? Max looks worried. Robert tried to smile at her, but his face was now visibly pale and there was a slight tremor in his hands. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about. His words were cut off as he suddenly gripped the edge of the piano bench, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Max immediately moved into action, positioning himself so that Robert could lean against his sturdy frame while simultaneously barking once. A sharp, urgent sound that immediately got everyone's attention. Call 911. Patricia shouted, her nurse's training taking over as she rushed toward Robert. And someone get the AED from the wall by the front desk. The room erupted into controlled chaos as adults sprang into action while trying to keep the children calm. But it was Lily who provided the most crucial assistance. Still standing beside Robert, she took his hand in both of hers and began speaking in the soothing tone she'd learned from watching Max comfort others. It's okay, Mr. Whitaker, she said softly but clearly. Max is here, and we're all here, and the helpers are coming. Just breathe like Max breathes, slow and gentle. Incredibly, Robert's panicked breathing began to slow as he focused on Lily's voice and the steady, warm presence of Max pressed against his side. The dog had positioned himself perfectly to provide physical support while keeping his amber eyes locked on Robert's face, as if willing his human to stay calm and present. That's it, Patricia encouraged, checking Robert's pulse while they waited for the paramedics. Just keep breathing with Lily and Max. You're going to be okay. When the ambulance arrived 8 minutes later, they found Robert stable and alert, though clearly shaken. The paramedic, a young woman named Jessica Torres, was amazed by the scene she encountered. I've never seen anything like this, she told Patricia as they prepared to transport Robert to the hospital. Usually when we respond to cardiac episodes, the patient is in full panic mode. But he's remarkably calm. What happened here? Patricia looked at Max, who was still standing guard beside the stretcher, and at Lily, who was holding Robert's hand with fierce determination. I think, she said slowly, we just witnessed the most powerful therapy team in action. As the ambulance pulled away with Robert inside, and Max riding along at his side, thanks to his official therapy dog status, the gathered family stood in stunned silence. The morning that had begun with music and laughter had become something much more profound, a reminder of how fragile life could be and how powerful the bonds of love and loyalty could be in the face of that fragility. The cardiac care unit at Austin General Hospital had never hosted a visitor quite like Max before. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the attending cardiologist, had initially been skeptical about allowing a dog into the ICU. But after witnessing the remarkable calm that Max brought to not only Robert but other patients on the floor, she found herself making exceptions to rules she'd never bent before. His vitals are significantly better when the dog is present, She explained to Patricia and Miguel, who had driven straight to the hospital after ensuring Lily was safely with neighbors. I've seen therapy animals before, but nothing like this. It's as if the dog can sense exactly what Mr. Whitaker needs moment by moment. Through the glass window of Robert's room, they could see Max lying on a blanket beside the hospital bed, his massive head resting on his paws, but his amber eyes alert and watchful. Robert's hand dangled over the side of the bed, his fingers buried in Max's soft fur, and for the first time since the ambulance ride, he appeared to be sleeping peacefully. The cardiologist says it was a mild heart attack, Patricia told Miguel quietly. Stress-induced, probably triggered by the emotional intensity of playing those particular songs. But she also said that Max's intervention, getting him to calm down quickly, likely prevented it from being much worse. Miguel shook his head in amazement. That dog somehow knew before any of us did. The way he was behaving, trying to get Robert's attention, it was like he could sense the heart attack coming. Dogs can detect changes in scent, body temperature, even electrical activity, Patricia explained. But Max seems to go beyond that. It's like he has an emotional radar that picks up on things we can't see. Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Walsh approaching with a tablet in her hands. I wanted to show you something interesting, she said, pulling up a series of heart monitor readings. These are Mr. Whitaker's cardiac rhythms from the past 6 hours. See these sections here? She pointed to areas where the jagged lines smoothed into more regular patterns. These correspond exactly to the times when Max was closest to him. And look at this. She scrolled to a new screen showing video footage from the room's security camera. This was taken about an hour ago. Mr. Whitaker was having an anxiety episode, not uncommon after a cardiac event, and watch what Max does. On the screen, they could see Robert tossing restlessly in his sleep, his face contorted with distress. Max immediately stood up, placed his front paws carefully on the edge of the bed, and began what could only be described as humming, a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to match the tempo of a heartbeat. He's mimicking the rhythm that Robert plays on the piano, Patricia breathed. Max has memorized the musical patterns that bring Robert comfort. And it works, Dr. Walsh confirmed. Within 2 minutes of Max starting that humming sound, Mr. Whitaker's heart rate normalized and he fell into peaceful sleep. When visiting hours resumed that afternoon, Patricia brought Lily to see Robert, despite some reservations about exposing her 4-year-old to the hospital environment. But Lily had been inconsolable since learning that Robert was sick, and Patricia knew that sometimes children needed to see for themselves that their loved ones were okay. Is Mr. Whitaker going to be all right? Lily whispered as they approached his room. And is Max sad because his daddy is sick? Mr. Whitaker is going to be fine, Patricia assured her. And I think Max is being very brave, taking such good care of him. When they entered the room, Max's greeting was subdued but warm. He approached Lily with his characteristic gentleness, but Patricia noticed that he kept glancing back at Robert, reluctant to leave his post for long. Max, you're such a good helper, Lily said softly, wrapping her small arms around the dog's neck. Mr. Whitaker is lucky to have you. Robert's eyes fluttered open at the sound of her voice. When he saw Lily standing beside his bed with Max, his face lit up with a smile that transformed his pale, tired features. There's my favorite musician, he said weakly. I was hoping you'd come visit. I brought you something, Lily announced importantly, reaching into the small backpack Patricia had helped her pack. She pulled out a piece of paper covered with crayon drawings. I drew Max taking care of you, and all the kids from Music Circle sending you love. Robert studied the drawing with the seriousness it deserved. Lily had drawn Max wearing his red therapy vest, sitting beside a bed with a figure that was unmistakably Robert. Around the borders of the paper, stick-figure children held hands in a circle, with musical notes floating above their heads like colorful confetti. This is beautiful, Lily, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. But I have something to tell you too. Something important. He gestured for her to come closer, and when she did, he spoke in the conspiratorial tone that children love. While I was sleeping, I had a dream about your grandmama Clara. She told me something very special about you. Lily's eyes grew wide. What did she say? She said that you have a gift for bringing music to people's hearts when they need it most. And she said that Max knew this about you from the very first day he met you. That's why he jumped over the fence. Not just to keep you safe from the pool, but because he could tell you were someone special who would help him help others. Patricia felt her throat tighten with emotion as she watched the profound connection between this elderly man and her daughter. But it was what Robert said next that truly amazed her. Clara also told me that she's been working on a new song, Up in Heaven, and she wants me to finish it here on Earth. She said it's a song about how love never really goes away. It just changes form and finds new ways to help people. He reached over to the bedside table where a nurse had placed a notebook and pen. With trembling but determined hands, he began sketching out musical notes. "Would you like to help me write Clara's song?" he asked Lily. "I think it needs a little girl's voice to make it complete." As Lily climbed carefully onto the chair beside Robert's bed and began humming experimental melodies while Max settled back into his protective position, Patricia realized they were witnessing something profound. This wasn't just about recovery from a heart attack or even about the therapeutic bond between a child and a dog. This was about the ways that love transcends loss, how music can bridge the gap between past and present, and how sometimes the most broken hearts can create the most beautiful songs. The melody that emerged from their collaboration that afternoon would later become the signature song of the Max Music Circle program. But more than that, it would become Robert's way of honoring his wife's memory while embracing the new family he'd found in the most unexpected places. The letter arrived on a crisp October morning, 6 months to the day after Max had first leaped over the fence that changed everything. Miguel stood in the kitchen, holding the thick envelope from the Washington Post, his hands trembling slightly as he read the offer inside. Senior investigative correspondent, National Desk, a salary that would secure their family's future. Everything he'd worked toward for 15 years in journalism. "What is it?" Patricia asked, looking up from where she was helping Lily practice the piano piece she'd be performing with Robert and Max at the upcoming Harvest Festival. Miguel silently handed her the letter, watching her face as she read. He saw the exact moment when the implications hit her, the way her eyes widened, then clouded with uncertainty. "Washington," she said quietly. "They want us to move to Washington." "Move?" Lily's voice piped up from the piano bench, her small fingers frozen above the keys. "But we can't move. Max lives here, and Mr. Whitaker needs us." Patricia and Miguel exchanged a look that carried the weight of every difficult decision parents face when personal dreams collide with family bonds. This opportunity represented everything Miguel had dreamed of, a chance to work on stories that could impact national policy, to have his investigations reach millions of readers instead of thousands. "Lily, honey, Daddy and I need to talk about this," Patricia said gently. "Why don't you go practice your duet with Max in the backyard?" As Lily reluctantly left the kitchen, calling for Max who appeared instantly at her side, Patricia sank into a chair across from her husband. "This is exactly what you've wanted, isn't it?" "I thought it was," Miguel admitted, his voice heavy with conflict. "But that was before." He gestured toward the window where they could see Lily sitting in the grass with Max, her tiny hands gesturing expressively as she told him about the song they were going to perform. "Before what?" Patricia prompted gently. "Before I realized that sometimes the most important stories aren't the ones that make headlines. They're the ones that change individual lives, one person at a time." The conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock at the kitchen door. Through the glass, they could see Robert standing on their back porch, his face grave with concern. Since his heart attack, he'd made remarkable physical progress, but emotionally, he seemed more fragile, as if the brush with mortality had reminded him how quickly everything could be lost. "I hope I'm not intruding," Robert said as Patricia opened the door. But Lily seemed upset when she came outside. She kept saying something about moving away. Miguel showed him the letter, watching as Robert read it with the same mixture of pride and devastation that he'd been feeling himself. "This is wonderful news for you," Robert said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "A tremendous opportunity." "But," Patricia prompted, sensing there was more. Robert sat down heavily at their kitchen table, suddenly looking every one of his 74 years. "I've been thinking a lot since the heart attack. About Clara, about the choices we make, about what really matters." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Clara and I never had children of our own. We told ourselves our music was enough, that we didn't need anything else. But in these past months, watching Lily grow, being part of something larger than myself, I realized how much we'd missed." His voice broke slightly. "If you leave, I understand. Of course I understand." But I have to tell you that Lily and Max, and all of you, you've given an old man a reason to wake up in the morning. You've given me a family when I thought it was too late for that." Patricia felt tears stinging her eyes. Through the window, she could see Lily showing Max how to conduct music by waving a stick in rhythm, the dog's tail wagging in perfect time with her movements. The sight was so purely joyful that it made her chest ache. "There's something else," Miguel said quietly. "Dr. Santos called this morning. The city council voted unanimously to approve funding for the Max Music Circle program. They want to expand it to every elementary school in the district, and they've asked Patricia to head the research division." Patricia's head snapped up in surprise. "You didn't tell me that." "The call came right before the letter arrived. I was planning to surprise you. But then—" He gestured helplessly at the Washington Post offer. Robert's eyes brightened for the first time since entering their kitchen. "Patricia, that's incredible. This program could help thousands of children. Only if we stay," Patricia said, the conflict evident in her voice. "And only if we can convince the school district that what we've created here is replicable." "What does your heart tell you?" Robert asked quietly. "Not your head, not your practical concerns. What does your heart say?" Before either of them could answer, Lily's voice floated through the open door, pure and sweet, as she sang the song she and Robert had written together during his hospital stay. Max's gentle, harmonizing whines provided a perfect accompaniment, and the music seemed to wrap around them like a warm embrace. "My heart," Patricia said slowly, "says that some opportunities only come once in a lifetime. And I'm not talking about the job offer." Miguel nodded, understanding immediately what she meant. The chance to build something meaningful from the ground up, to create a program that could change how we think about healing and connection. "But what about your career?" Robert asked Miguel. "Your dreams?" Miguel was quiet for a long moment, listening to his daughter's voice and thinking about all the stories he'd covered over the years, the corruption exposés, the political scandals, the investigations that had earned him awards but left him feeling somehow empty. "You know what I've discovered?" he said finally. "The most important story I've ever covered is happening right here in my backyard. And I'm not just reporting on it, I'm living it." That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Robert had become a regular guest since his heart attack. They made their decision. Miguel would turn down the Washington Post offer and instead focus on documenting and expanding the Max Music Circle program. Patricia would accept the research position with the city, and they would stay in Willow Creek, in the community that had embraced them and been transformed by the love between a little girl and a remarkable dog. "Are you sure?" Lily asked seriously when they told her about their decision. "Because if you really wanted to move, Max and Mr. Whitaker and I could try to be brave about it." "We're sure, sweetheart," Miguel said, pulling his daughter onto his lap. "Because we've learned that home isn't just a place. It's the people and the love you build there." As if understanding the significance of the moment, Max patted over and placed his massive head on Lily's lap, his amber eyes reflecting the contentment they all felt. Outside, the first autumn leaves were beginning to fall, marking the end of one season and the beginning of another. But inside the Martinez home, surrounded by the chosen family they discovered in the most unexpected way, everything felt like a new beginning. 1 year later, the Willow Creek Community Center buzzed with an energy that would have been impossible to imagine before a German shepherd named Max leaped over a fence and changed everything. The annual Harvest Festival had been transformed from a modest neighborhood gathering into a regional celebration that drew families from across Central Texas, all coming to witness the program that local media had dubbed the Max Miracle. Lily Martinez, now 5 years old and brimming with confidence, stood on the small stage that had been erected in the center's main hall. She wore a bright red dress that matched Max's therapy vest, and her dark curls were adorned with a crown of autumn leaves that Robert had helped her make that morning. At her feet, Max sat in perfect position, his amber eyes alert and devoted as always. "Welcome, everyone, to our first annual Max Music Circle Festival," Lily announced into the microphone with the poise of someone far beyond her years. "Today we're going to show you how music and love can help heal hearts." The audience, nearly 300 people packed into every available space, erupted in applause. Patricia, watching from the side of the stage, felt her chest swell with pride as she saw not just her daughter, but all the children who had been transformed by this extraordinary program. Tommy Peterson, once too anxious to speak in public, now confidently played percussion alongside the community orchestra. The Williams twins had overcome their separation anxiety and were leading a group of younger children in a hand-clapping song. Carlos from the corner house, who had struggled with anger management issues, sat peacefully beside Max, his small hand resting on the dog's back as he waited for his turn to perform. "Ladies and gentlemen," came Robert's warm voice over the sound system, "I'd like to tell you about a little girl who taught an old man that it's never too late to find family, and a dog who taught all of us that love knows no boundaries." Robert, looking healthier and happier than he had in years, took his place at the piano. His silver hair was neatly combed, and he wore a simple black suit with a red boutonniere that matched Max's vest. The months since his heart attack had been transformative, not just physically, but emotionally. The music that had once been a source of pain had become a source of healing, both for himself and for countless others. "This song," Robert continued, his fingers finding the opening chords, "was written by my late wife Clara, completed by a 4-year-old girl named Lily, and arranged by a dog named Max who taught us all how to listen with our hearts." As the familiar melody filled the air, something magical happened. Max, without any prompting, began his characteristic humming, the low, rhythmic sound that had become his signature contribution to their performances. Lily's clear soprano voice joined in, singing the words she and Robert had crafted together during those precious hospital visits. "Love doesn't leave when someone goes away. It finds new hearts where it can stay. Like music floating on the air, love is always, always there." But it wasn't just Lily singing. One by one, voices throughout the audience joined in. Parents who had learned the song from their children, grandparents who had discovered new purpose in these weekly gatherings, teachers who had witnessed transformations in their classrooms, all united in a chorus that seemed to embody everything the Max Music Circle had come to represent. Miguel, standing in the back with his camera, felt tears streaming down his face as he documented this moment. His book, When Fences Fall, The Dog Who Taught a Community to Heal, had been published 3 months earlier and was already being adapted for schools and therapy programs across the country. But no amount of success could compare to the simple joy of watching his daughter lead 300 people in a song about the enduring power of love. Dr. Rebecca Santos stepped forward as the song concluded, her own eyes misty with emotion. "1 year ago," she announced, "we launched a pilot program with 1 dog, 1 child, and 1 elderly man. Today, I'm proud to announce that the Max Music Circle program has been implemented in 43 schools, 12 hospitals, and 6 senior care facilities across Texas. We've documented measurable improvements in anxiety, depression, social skills, and overall emotional well-being in over 2,000 children and adults." The applause was thunderous, but Dr. Santos held up her hand for quiet. However, the real success of this program can't be measured in statistics. It can only be measured in moments like this, when a community comes together and remembers that healing happens not through medicine or therapy alone, but through connection, through love, and through the willingness to leap over the fences that separate us from one another. As if understanding that this was his moment, Max rose from his position beside the piano and walked to the center of the stage. The massive German Shepherd surveyed the crowd with his intelligent amber eyes, his tail wagging slowly as he seemed to take in the faces of all the people whose lives he had touched. "I think Max has something to say," Lily announced, kneeling beside her beloved friend. Max's response was a single, clear bark that seemed to echo with joy and contentment. It was followed by the kind of silence that speaks volumes, the silence of a community that had found its heart. Later that evening, as the crowds dispersed and the cleanup began, the core family that had started it all gathered in the Martinez backyard. Patricia and Miguel sat on their porch swing, watching as Lily played her final song of the day for an audience of 1 very attentive German Shepherd. Robert sat nearby in a lawn chair, his fingers absently playing imaginary piano keys as he hummed along. "You know what I realized today?" Patricia said softly to her husband. "We didn't just save Max from being rejected from that therapy program. He saved all of us from lives that were smaller than they needed to be." Miguel nodded, thinking about the Washington Post offer he'd turned down, about the predictable life they'd been living before a dog taught them to leap over their own fences. "Clara was right," he said. remembering Robert's stories about his late wife. Love really doesn't leave, it just finds new forms. As the Texas sun set behind the oak trees of Willow Creek, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lily's voice drifted across the yard one final time. She was making up a new song, something about friendship and forever, and the way that some things are too beautiful to ever really end. Max lay beside her in the grass, his massive head resting on his paws, his amber eyes reflecting the last light of day. In those eyes was the wisdom of a creature who had always known what the humans were just learning, that the most important boundaries in life aren't the fences that keep us apart, but the barriers in our own hearts that prevent us from loving as deeply and freely as we're meant to. And in a quiet suburb outside Austin, Texas, where perfectly manicured lawns stretched beneath endless sky, a community had learned that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest act of all: choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, and hope over despair. Sometimes, all it takes is one brave leap. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and if you watched all the way to the end, comment, "I watched all the way through," and share your thoughts about this story. Oh, and don't forget to check out the next video that appears on the end screen. It's really exciting.